Trae. Come on, it's the day with Trae. With Trae. Come on, it's the day with Trae. With Trae. Come on, it's the day with Trae.
Pump it up, pump it up.
Trae.
Come on, come on.
With Trae.
Pump it up, pump it up.
It's the day with Trae.
This is the day to gain inspiration, to make a positive change in the nation. We're inviting you to partake in conversation, to raise your vibration. It's the day that we will all celebrate all of our peace that make this thing elevate. Watch the negative fade away, cause it's the day with Trae.
Grand Rising, everyone. Welcome to the Day with Trae. I'm your host, Trae Holiday. I want to welcome you to a wonderful Wednesday, y'all. I'm really excited. I get to do a deep dive with Nick Brown, former U.S. attorney and now running for Washington State's Attorney General, y'all. So we got a lot to dive into. But of course, as you know, it is the top of the show. So it's a perfect time to tag and share this stream right here. You know what? Y'all are helping us grow. Please continue to tag and share the stream and let folks know that right here we got a daily dose of dopeness for them. So if there's anybody in your circle of influence or in your world that you think could benefit from that, please make sure that they know about what we're doing here on the Day with Trae. Also, you know what? If you can't watch our show like on the TV screen or on your phone screen, that's okay too, because you can listen to us anywhere you find your favorite podcast. Just search Converge Media Network in the Day with Trae. You'll find me on whichever platform is your favorite. There's like 200 of them or something. So don't worry. Just go ahead and search for your favorite one. You'll find us there. Well, huge shout out to y'all for being with me throughout the week. And on this wonderful Wednesday, I'm telling you, just yesterday we talked a bit about public service, and I'm excited to kind of continue that conversation today because that's exactly where I'm going with Nick Brown, who's up next. He's going to be talking about his candidacy for the Attorney General, which is a big job. I'm going to get into it with him, but I'm glad that he's here. Hi, Nick.
Hey, good to be with you.
Yeah, great to have you here. I get to do a deep dive with you today. So
Let's
I want to spend the first half of the show really talking about your former work. A U.S. State's attorney, that means something to a lot of people. And I want to just kind of get the background here. What got you going into the world of law?
Well, in many ways, I kind of fell into it. When I was growing up, I didn't think about being a lawyer. It wasn't on my radar. I didn't come from a family of lawyers. I went off to college and I paid for college in an Army ROTC scholarship. Mm-hmm. So I had an obligation to go into the military once I got out of Morehouse. And as I started thinking about what I wanted to do and how I wanted to serve, I was thinking more and more about law school. I was a political science major and I was thinking I would do something in government or politics. And so because I had the Army obligation, I said, for me, the best way to serve is to be a JAG lawyer, Army lawyer, representing soldiers, working with soldiers and their families. And so I started on that track. And then really once I got into the courtroom and started representing people, I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. This felt good. It felt meaningful, it felt hard. It felt like I was changing people's lives in a positive way. And that was just the start of a whole legal career.
Wow. Well, that there's always something to be said. So you were did your service and then were able to serve others who were in service. Tell us a bit about what that meant to you and how it was to be impacting, positively the families that were dealing with various issues that were coming across your desk.
Well, I start with my parents. Both my parents were public servants. They met back in the 60s in the Army. My father was an Army medical logistics officer, and he was working at Walter Reed Army Medical Hospital in Washington, D.C., and my mother was an Army nursing student there, and so that's how they met, and then they spent their careers, my father in the military, and then in state government. So really for me, all throughout my life, they were talking about service and being engaged and giving a damn about what was happening around us. And so in many ways, it was creeping into me consciously and subconsciously. And so when I came into the military myself and people would walk into my office looking for help, looking for answers, in the beginning it was relatively small things like, how do I get out of this car loan that has a super high interest rate, or more complicated things around family law. And then when I started doing criminal work, I was representing soldiers. I was an Army criminal defense lawyer. And these young men and women will come in my office accused of some crime by the government, and they're looking at me to protect them and their rights and their liberty. And, you know, that's a scary feeling for a new lawyer, but it's also super empowering to know that someone's liberty depends on how well you can do your job. And so doing that job for a couple of years on the defense side was a great foundation for me for my legal career, because it really gave me some insight to how the law works, how government works, the power, how it can be misused, the impact that our decisions would have on people, and not just themselves, but their family members, the community. And so when I became a prosecutor later, I got to bring that foundation with me, and knowing that every time I signed my name to an indictment, the impact that would have, and how careful and prudent we had to be about those decisions. So representing people was a great way to start. And, you know, I've been a lawyer for a little bit long now, but, you know, the vast majority has been in the public sector, working with people, working with the governments, trying to make this place a better place to live.
Well, it says a lot, honestly, because it's needed, right? First and foremost, it's just heavily needed. And especially when we think about like the adversities that people are facing today, it sounds, you know, some folks will say, well, honestly, this is just a reflection of what's before, but I feel like there's some new nuances that are hitting our area, you know, right? And it's, I don't know if it's the rise of technology. I don't know if it's this increased individualism. I'm not sure exactly what the cause of it is, but the effect feels dramatic. So you at some point then take all of that experience and you take it then to be the United States attorney. I mean, there's a leap there too. So you go from defense to prosecution to the United States attorney. Tell us about that.
So it took a little while to get there. So I was in the Army active duty, and then I got out and worked for the Department of Justice here in Seattle and Tacoma. So doing criminal cases for the federal government. But I had always had an interest in politics and policy. And at the time, I was very DC focused, like what was happening out in DC or not happening in DC, what was going on with Obama, all those sorts of things. And then I had an opportunity to interview and serve with Governor Inslee. So I moved down to Olympia and was the Governor Inslee's general counsel. So the lawyer for him and his team, the main liaison with the AG's office. And as soon as I got down to Olympia, I just realized that all the things that I cared about just in my own lives, you know, my neighborhoods, my schools, my taxes, transportation, most of those decisions were being made at a state and local level. Yeah. And I hadn't been paying that much attention to like who my state rep was and what were the bills going on. But I think 90% of the things that you and I think about are mostly here, and they're local. They're not in DC. And DC sucks up all of our energy sometimes for obvious and sometimes good reasons. But as soon as I got down to Olympia, we started working on things where we were having immediate impact. Like literally my first day on the job, we started working on putting a moratorium on the death penalty. Wow. It was sitting on my desk, this case, and we had to start working, and I spent a year doing that project for the governor, and then we put a moratorium on it, like change the course of justice. And I just realized that how much work we could do at a state level. So I worked with Governor Inslee for 4 years, came back up here to Seattle, worked at a private law firm that does mostly government-focused or public-focused work. And then in 2021 was nominated by President Biden. And it was a dream job for me in many ways, because I had been a line prosecutor there, and then now I was the boss all of a sudden. And I had staff and employees that worked for me, and 2 offices, and with jurisdiction from Bellingham to Longview to the Cascades. And so trying to figure out how we keep people safe, how we do justice, how we protect civil rights, how we do all these things was hard and complicated, but it was a dream job to get there. And I really loved being U.S. attorney.
Well, you know, I want to talk a bit about some of the work you were doing there, because I mean, when you talk about a moratorium, you know, that's important work. And you're so right about all the things, you know, the death penalty is huge, but all the things that really move the needle when we're talking about impact and changing people's lives here. But clemency is another area. And I wanted to talk a bit about that for you, because that was also something you embraced in your role. Tell us a bit more about why that was important.
Yeah, you know, it's one of the most important powers that any governor in the country has. Is you have in almost every state, a governor, by signing a document, can either erase a conviction or reduce somebody's time in prison. And a lot of governors use that power. Some very much do not, because they don't want to. The politics of it are hard. But Governor Inslee, to his credit, was willing to lean into doing that work and be a lawyer. I manage that process. So we have a state clemency board that hears petitions and cases, and then they come to the governor's office, and then he makes the decisions. And so once or twice a month, I was meeting with him, and we're going through cases and trying to decide whether or not to agree or disagree with the clemency board. And for me, it was a belief that everybody is redeemable or deserves a shot at redemption. I believe that we need to arrest and put people in prison sometimes to reduce harm, to take bad actors out of the community. But I also believe that we shouldn't just forget about them, and that people can get out and be good and change their life if we support them, if we make our prison conditions better and give them at least an opportunity at that. So I spent a lot of time in our state prisons, traveling around, meet with individuals, hearing their cases, talking to their lawyers. And I'm really proud of the work that Governor Inslee did. At the end of the day, it's his signature to approve these cases, but he leaned into it. He did more clemency cases in the first 4.5 years that I was with him than any governor ever had.
Wow.
And not in all easy cases. There's some things that are like, all right, you got this small drug conviction, most people will get around it. But he really leaned into some cases where there are much tougher decisions to be made. And again, that was just reinforcing to me, like, as much as our political energy, or we get, it's an election year, everybody's talking about Trump and Biden. I was like, there's so many things here that are happening that most people just don't pay attention to. And every year in the legislature, they pass hundreds of bills, hundreds. Some are small changes, but many are major impacts on your life and the things that you care about. And for the most part, we don't put enough energy into that. And so part of the reason that I was driven to run for AG is that I just realized that, in fact, we can change people's lives here by leaning in, and we have to be in the room and at the table doing that work. And so it's important for me to continue to do that work just based on the legacy of my parents, but also because I realize how much new voices that we need down there.
Yeah, no, it's important because when I think about some of those changes, it's folks with lived experience. It's really bringing them not only to the table, because that's like it's almost a cliche statement at this point, like, oh, everyone needs to be at the table. But I think too that there's something to be said about someone like yourself who can bring in different lived experience that also allows for folks to understand the importance of certain things and how they have that great impact right here in our home state. I mean, but also I think that this is important too, because, when you think about being able to kind of be bold, I'm always saying, Washington has the opportunity to lead. I've been saying it since I was in, community service, or probably since college days, where I was just like, there's something different about here, because I lived in other places, right? And I experienced like, wait a minute, like people are not gathering together. Their voices are not mattering at a high level. And then being here, it was like, but that was always what we came from. So I didn't know no different, right? So I thought it was the same everywhere until I went to other places. I'm like, okay, it's not the same. Tell us a bit about how important it is to have that level of community advocacy for y'all to be in the spaces you were in, to be able to be driven sometimes by that collective voice and that collective power.
Yeah, I mean, I fundamentally believe to do the big, hard, challenging things, you need both, right? You need the voices in the community. You need people marching, advocating, calling their representatives, legislators. Like, you need that voice and that energy, because most people who are in government, like, they have their own narrow viewpoint, and they might have some perspective about how to make things better. But unless the community is, reaching out and demanding change or asking the right questions and holding folks accountable when they don't live up to that, you're not going to have positive change. But for me, you also need people in the room. And it is a little bit cliche to say we need to be at the table, but somebody's at the table, right? Somebody's got the pen in their hand, allocating the budget, signing bills, vetoing bills, bringing cases or not bringing cases. And if we or people from out the community are not in that room, for me, I've always thought it's not enough just to be in the community, and everybody's got to find their space. Like I've been a mostly government side public servant, and that's where I found my impact. But so much of my work depends on people telling me, like, here's a problem over here, like, that I never heard of. It's not my community, it's not my neighborhood, I didn't know about it. And we need all of that. We need people that are actually willing to listen and engage to try to make things better. And so I do think it takes both. It really does, and the death penalty is actually a really good example, because for years, community folks had been pushing and advocating to end the death penalty, leading up to 2014 when Governor Inslee did it. And if some other governor or some other general counsel had been there, it may not have happened. And I definitely think it wouldn't have happened as soon as it did. But so we, the community had pushed the ball up the hill a long way, and then just run into roadblocks because there wasn't leadership there in elected office to do it. And so, you need that combination of things to have good things happen. And Washington's done some great stuff, over the last many years. But we also need to be more aggressive and more bold. And if you look around the country, there's a lot of state legislatures that have very small majorities, and they're passing through good policy. And here we have some pretty healthy majorities. And sometimes I'm feeling like this time is fleeting, y'all. You better use it while you got it to really push it forward. And so, part of the reason I'm excited to be there is just to use the time to the best I can in that short time, because somebody will be there after me.
Yeah.
And we need to keep working.
Well, see, this is getting us to what we're going to get to after the break, because now we get to talk about your candidacy. I mean, to take all of your experience and to be going for a run as the Attorney General, that says something. So we're going to be diving into that right after this short break. Y'all, you definitely don't want to miss this part, because for all of you out there who are Washington voters, you want to know why Nick Brown needs your vote. So definitely stay tuned after this short break. You're watching The Day with Trae.
What's up, Seattle, Rose City, Big Boise, Spokane, T-Town? I see you every weekend on Back to Besa. And of course, I'm bringing you stories from all over the PNW. You already know your girl's keeping it real everywhere I go. And of course, you can stream current episodes right now on the Fox Local app, available on your smart TV.
What's up, everybody? Trae Holiday here with a special announcement. Something sexy for the city is coming to our town, Tacoma Dome, May 3rd. You want to get your tickets today because you want to see Ashanti, Monica, Maya, Kiki Wyatt, and Anne Marie. Y'all, I have the pleasure of emceeing this phenomenal concert. Join me and get your tickets today for an epic performance from these R&B divas.
Looking for laughs? Looking for love? Fast Talking Figaro has got you covered. Toe-tapping melodies, lively staging, and colorful costumes. Don't miss The Barber of Seville, May 4th through 19th at McCall Hall. Tickets at seattleopera.org.
Welcome back, everyone, to The Day with Trae. I'm your host, Trae Holiday. We are continuing our discussion with Nick Brown. Now, Nick, you were just talking about all of the experience that you've had as an attorney, the work that you've done with Governor Inslee, being a part of, service in government. Now you're taking all of that and you're saying, you know what, I think I have something that I can contribute to as the Washington State Attorney General. Tell us a bit more about why you've chosen to go after this seat.
Well, stepping down as U.S. Attorney was undoubtedly the hardest professional decision I had to make, because I loved that job. I had an office of good people doing hard work. It was rewarding, and that's a presidential appointment. And to leave it, you have to write a letter of resignation to the president. So I'm sitting there typing out my letter like, "Ooh, am I sure about this?" But for me, ultimately, it was getting back to the state where I really felt like the biggest impact could be made at the state level. It was a realization that the work really matters, whether we realize it or not. In my view, what's happening in Olympia really has an impact on our lives. And I also just felt like I didn't want to be watching the election. I didn't want to be sitting at home crossing my fingers that thing went well. And for me, it felt like the right time to run and, to let my own career ride or die with my own advocacy on my behalf, rather than sitting around hoping I had a job still if the president got reelected. And I also, had to think about, can I win this race? Like, I wasn't going to run if I didn't think I could win. And I started thinking about who else might run and what the likelihood would be. And I knew if we did it right and we worked hard, I could win and make a little history in the course of that as well. When I came into the studio, I was looking out on this wall, and you guys have all this beautiful history and legacy of Black folks in this state. But Washington has never elected a statewide Black official outside of the Supreme Court. in our history, in no executive office. And to have the opportunity to be the first also mattered to me. And it also comes with some challenges because there's never been anyone. So I'm excited about the race and doing the work, but also trying to, make a history in the process.
Wow. I mean, this is really, you talk about history making. That's big. That's huge, right? That has a bunch of implications that sometimes we really don't know until years way after,
Sure.
right? But there's also something to be said about, I think, the experience that you've had and understanding, as a attorney general, a lot of stuff comes across your desk. I mean, right? And so I want to give folks an understanding of what that work looks like and why you felt like, no, the experience I've garnered over my career
Sure.
really sets me up for success there.
Well, I think the first place to start is people don't realize how big of an office it is. There's about 800 lawyers that work in the Attorney General's office, about 1,700 staff, 13 offices across the state. So the sheer size of the agency, it's by far the biggest law firm in the state, and one of the biggest in the country per capita.
Wow.
For AG's offices. So the management job is really big. I think about the role in kind of three different ways. One, we represent state government, all the agencies. So, Department of Transportation, they have lawyers. Department of Commerce, they have lawyers. All these places where people intersect, they have lawyers, and it's our job to represent them and to approve the provision of legal services, because at the end of the day, they're representing the public. The other one is that you are the lawyer on behalf of the people. And so even though you work for the government entities, you have independent constitutional authority to bring cases on people's behalves. That's consumer protection cases. So when companies are misleading you or defrauding the public, you can go after them, litigate, investigate, use those tools. When there are civil rights violations in housing and jobs in schools, the AG's office can investigate and hold people accountable for that. When there's employers, stealing wages from their employees, you can investigate and bring cases for wage theft and that kind of thing. Environmental protections, like all these things that you have the responsibility to do. And increasingly, as we've seen in the last few years, some of the national impacts, right? So AG Ferguson, the current Attorney General, he obviously made a lot of news over the years by suing the Trump administration. And that really mattered. We were the first state in the country to work on opposing the Trump Muslim ban. Bob and his team a couple years ago were the first state, or one of the first states, to make sure that abortion medication was available for women in Washington state. Mm-hmm. And that wouldn't have happened but for the AG's office being ready and prepared and having a good team to litigate those cases. So there's a myriad of really important things. And then the third thing is you can, as the Attorney General, suggest and recommend and write policy. So every AG focuses on certain areas about what I want to have new legislation, new laws, improve systems, improve people's lives. And so you can work with the legislature to introduce policy and pass that through. And it's called AG request legislation. So there's a lot of different jobs. The main job is to manage a good team, to build a vision, to help execute on that. And for me, it was just the history of stuff that I've done in my career that we've talked about that made me think that I could do that job and that I'd be good at it. And then it would be fun. Like I'm not doing it for the money, right? The government service never is paying you as much as you can make in private practice. But because of my foundation and things I've always cared about, I'm like, this can be a job I like too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't say that, when you talk about making history and being the first Black elected official at that level, I'd start going, okay, there are some unique challenges that Black community members are facing. How do you embrace those challenges and think about that if you win this seat? I mean, that's something that has to be a part of, I think, anybody who is going after a large seat. They got to be thinking about the unique challenges that Washingtonians are facing. How do you see yourself, really being able to answer or create solutions for some of those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I start from the place that I won't pretend to have all the answers from people, and no elected person should come into office promising to do all these things or pretending like they understand, because everybody's got different experiences, and Black folks are not a monolith, right? There's all different types, different perspectives, different backgrounds. But there are a lot of areas in our state government where Black communities of color have been hit hardest on economic opportunity, on housing justice, certainly civil rights issues. In more and more environmental issues are coming to the forefront, where Black and brown communities have been targeted by pollution because they put all the bad stuff in the neighborhoods where communities don't have voices. And so there's a myriad of issues where we can do some market improvement on. And I think, what I'm hopeful for to be in that space, it allows people to be empowered a little bit more and look and reach somebody that they think they might relate to a little bit better. And I hope that they will. And, I remember when I was, you go in every federal building, they got a picture of the president and whoever is that agency head. And when I was a brand new federal prosecutor, it was George Bush, President Bush on the wall, and whatever attorney general that they had. And I remember the day when they switched those photos in the office that I worked to Obama and Eric Holder. Here I am, like, got a good education, I got a good job, I'm doing well, and that hit me. And I remember thinking, like, if that's hitting me, what would it be like for just folks who don't have that same opportunity, who aren't walking those halls? And then years later to come back and be the boss of that office, that can be life-changing. But it can only be life-changing if actually you're doing something different. Like, I don't want to be the first Black person in a statewide office just to be the first Black person, unless we're doing something a little bit different. So, hopefully I'll bring more focus and attention to some of these neglected areas that we're talking about. I'm really focused on housing issues. It's one of those areas where we have a problem now, and we're about to add a couple million people to Washington State in the next 10, 15 years. And so the problems that we might face then are going to be exponentially greater. And we've been kind of taking baby steps towards progress, not doing bold solutions. But housing to me is so foundational to so many things in our community. Obviously a lot of attention around homelessness, but it's also a public safety issue. Like, people become victims of crime when they don't have a safe place to live. And there's all these places where housing interfaces with our stability and our system. So housing is really big for me. Environmental justice is big for me. I'm a Inslee alum, and as you know, Governor Inslee, he preaches about the environment all the time. And so we're trying to figure out how we get those communities that have been most hurt the best improvements is going to be a big part of the AG's office, to make sure that programs are built that impacts their lives, that the money that's been allocated by the state and federal government actually gets out quickly to the communities that need it. That all requires lawyers to write regulations, to write policies, to make decisions about where things are cited and not cited. So we can do more in that work. And I think to AG Ferguson's credit, there is a civil rights unit in the office now that did not exist before he got there. And so you want to talk about how people can change, the trajectory. Like, he built a whole agency, and it's robust, and it's having national impact. And so to take that work and continue to build on it and make sure that people who are being discriminated against get some form of justice and get their voices heard is going to be a big part of the work.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you giving us an overview of the areas that you deem important and the ways that you would utilize the seat, the position, to really benefit Washingtonians. I think I really have this yearning, because I think there's always a barrier when it comes to community and government. There just is, right? Whether it's like, okay, mistrust, there's no transparency, you need to break down the barriers, trust needs to be built. All these things all coexist together in one fell swoop. And so I got to ask about how you plan to kind of break down those barriers so that folks can feel like when they do make a complaint or they have something that they want to bring to the AG's office, that they don't feel like they're dismissed, right? Yeah. That they do feel a sense of, wait a minute, I was heard, and I got a letter back, or someone communicated with me. Sure. How do you kind of foresee, opening that up for people so they can really feel like they belong here?
Yeah, it's hard, right? There's not a magic button that you push and everybody starts having faith in government again. And, right. You start with, or I start with, you tell the truth. Be honest. So many leaders, they try to say the right thing. They're scared of offending people. They want to try to make everybody happy. And that leads to dishonesty, or at least, not full transparency. So as a leader, it's important to tell the truth about what you know, what you don't know, and when you've made a mistake, there's the old show now, I guess, but the West Wing, that used to be back in the 90s. And there's this moment where when he's running for president, the guy says, well, I made that mistake, or I screwed you guys in this bill. And everybody's like, oh, that's so unusual, but that's, to me, kind of an important reminder, like telling the truth and being honest and being transparent goes a long way to build transparency. But then it's breaking down the barriers that you mentioned. In the AG's office, I think it's just trying to be as transparent as possible to explain why we're bringing cases, why we're not bringing cases, that we have an interface with the public that is accessible. So if you go onto the website, people know where to file a complaint for consumer protection or civil rights violation. They can see cases that we're working on, that we're transparent in the outreach that we're doing. You know, there are community liaisons in that office that have done better work than they used to do. You know, there's a real big focus on tribal engagement that didn't exist before. Mm-hmm. That's because they have a tribal liaison, an office, and a person focused on it. One of the things I'd like to do in the office is to create a labor and a worker protection division to make sure that we're getting more access to people that are being harmed in their workplaces. So you have to make those interfaces easier, and we have to get out of our offices and be in the community and show up. And obviously you can't be everywhere as the elected, but your team can be present, right? So you have to have people that show up in these places. And when you're running a statewide office, that means getting out of Seattle too. That means showing up in Eastern Washington. And there are not a lot of Democrats in Eastern Washington, and probably not a whole lot of people out there who might want to vote for me. But if I get the job, I'm still going to be in those communities because we have to represent everybody as well. And so being present is really, really important, but breaking down those barriers to accessibility, I think, is the real work ahead.
Well, this has been so enlightening for me. And of course, if folks out there are looking to follow the campaign, you know, find ways to connect with you, look right there, let them know how to do that.
Well, you can just go to nickbrownforag.com. That's nickbrownforag.com. Or you can follow me on social media at Nick Brown Now on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, etc.
Nick, thank you so much for the work you've done and for bringing, you know, this perspective to the race. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Y'all, it's been enlightening for me. I'm sure it was enlightening for you. I'm going to wrap all this enlightenment up right after this short break. Stay tuned. You're watching The Day with Trae.
What's up, Seattle, Rose City, Big Boise, Spokane, T-Town? I see you every weekend on Back to Besa. And of course, I'm bringing you stories from all over the PNW. You already know your girl's keeping it real everywhere I go. And of course, you can stream current episodes right now on the Fox Local app, available on your smart TV.
What's up, everybody? Trae Holiday here with a special announcement. Something sexy for the city is coming to our town, Tacoma Dome, May 3rd. You want to get your tickets today because you want to see Ashanti, Monica, Maya, Kiki Wyatt, and Anne Marie. Y'all, I have the pleasure of emceeing this phenomenal concert. Join me and get your tickets today for an epic performance from these R&B divas.
Looking for laughs? Looking for love? Fast Talking Figaro has got you covered. Toe-tapping melodies, lively staging, and colorful costumes. Don't miss The Barber of Seville, May 4th through 19th at McCall Hall. Tickets at seattleopera.org.
Welcome back, everyone, to The Day with Trae. I'm your host, Trae Holiday. What a wonderful Wednesday. You know, it was great to be able to do this deep dive today with Nick Brown and learn not only about his former position as United States Attorney, but how he's bringing his experience, his lived experience and expertise, and clearly passion for community to the race for Washington State's Attorney General seat. This is, for me, is one of those times where, you know, I understand the impact of this office. And because of that, it's great to be able to sit down and actually get a feel for what he would be bringing to that seat and to that office. And, you know, honestly, y'all, the vote is yours. But I think one of the things that I'm walking away with today, and he is so right, There's so much that happens at the local level. And this is why your vote locally is so important. Know who your representatives are, who your legislators are. Understand who you have that's supposed to be working on your behalf so that you can understand what priorities are they having? How is that office moving? How are they actually benefiting me? These kinds of questions that you can ask and that you can connect with your local officials on is important. So be engaged and be involved, y'all, because the more you are, the more they have to represent your interests. I thank you so much for watching today. You know, I'm going to be back with y'all until tomorrow at 11 a.m. Peace. Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. Support Converge Media today via Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at Converge Media.